Hello everyone, and welcome to the HSE webinar. We are going to present today the HSE software and all the new features that have recently been developed. We will also show many of the existing features just to make sure that you are aware of some of the existing elements. So, my name is Louis Malte, and I've been working at SAFI since 1996 and part of the development team. Let's start by quickly explaining what we have as an agenda for today. We will do a recap of the updates in version 13 and 14. One of the new features is really related to the new custom reports that allows you to generate reports in a much better way than before and to get exactly what you want in the report. We also have an option related to that where the user can display results for grouping not only for members as we had before. Also, we have a new auto generation option for monopoles. That will make the generation of those models much faster than before. For sure, all throughout the presentation, I'll show you different updates we have inside the interface. Let's quickly show you a review of the new features we have. We've added many different models into the auto generations recently. Those two models can be easily generated with the automation in the program. There are some other models with cables or arms like that can be added and modeled manually. We have also improved the lattice structures. There is now an option to have traffic lights, and any attachment can be added to the model, as we can see in this monopole. Since a few previous versions, we now have the option to design polygonal sections from 6 to 18 sides. There is also now much more advanced option to design the base plates. I would quickly like to discuss the report, but we will touch on this subject later in the presentation. In the report, we have added a new option which is called the custom report. This new report option is where you can select every table you need with a few options. Then, you will get a really customized report containing only what you want in the report. So, instead of having maybe 400 pages in the report as was the case before, now you will probably get a report closer to 15 to 30 pages including all the important details you want to have in the report. Once you have generated this report, you can also save it as a template for the next time. There's also an option where not only in the report, but on the screen, you can display the results in tables, not only per member, but also per group. I will show you where we regenerate groups so you can have for all groups only one line that summarizes the results for that table. For the monopoles, we have added a new generator. From the highway sign structure wizard, you can now select you want to use the monopole generator. Once you activate this option, you will have the options to click on monopole definitions where you have this menu displayed. From this menu, you just add the information you need to generate the monopole. Once this is done, you click Generate Monopole and you are done. The model is ready to work with adding the loads and running the analysis. One thing you have to pay attention to is you need to specify the unbraced K value for these high mass where the compression could also be important. For the user interface and new features, we added several new options in the display where you can quickly see the model in a solid view or wireframe. There are many additional options around this subject. For the displayed results, we have added on-screen options for fatigue and anchor rods. Comparing to previous versions, they are much easier to see on-screen than before. What I'll do in the next 10 to 15 minutes will be to present the first model of an overhead sign structure. Then, we will also have a look at another model which is for monopoles. Let's start with this model from inside the software. I won't start everything from scratch, so I will just open an existing file and quickly show you the options associated to this model. Let's say we will use the highway sign wizard in this case, but this kind of model can be easily generated. We will specify the basic information, for example, is it a steel model, what codes we want to use. We have the Canadian and American codes. For the American codes, we have LRFD and ASD. For the type of structure, we have access to different options. Here you will see the option for the monopole if you wanted to do that structure. In addition, if you were designing a manually made model, you would choose it from this menu. Let's quickly look at the inputs. I won't go into details on the inputs here, but as you can see, this beam has been generated. We just filled all the inputs located on this icon where we can see here. We also associated to the members some sections. So, the sections here, we're adding either standard or non-standard sections that have been defined. Let's look at the next option. So, we have different segments here. This beam is divided into two different segments. In fact, the beams are identical, but they're one beside the other. Then let's look at the column. The column, again, could be different if required. And then again, we still have to fill the information to get the dimension and the section of that structure. You may also have overhead structures with 3 columns if needed. If you would like to have that, you need to come back to the first option here, where you have an option to have 2 or 3 vertical supports. Some people would have what we call pedestals, so some small parts added below the column on the right hand side or the other. If there are no pedestals, just hit Next. Here we have added in the software all the options for fatigue. If we keep the default here, you will get all the default values. For sure, depending on the current details you have on the current structure, you will probably find from the code sometimes there are different maximal stresses that are applicable depending on what kind of details you have. These are just default data inputs. Again, for wind, as a wind profile, you can change it according to the height of the structure. You just specify it here. Where is your base according to the ground? So, if it's not 0, just put the information here. Once this is done, the model will generate automatically. I can show you it was exactly the case. I will erase part of the structure here. Whenever you click Generate, everything will generate again. Usually, the next step is to go through all these buttons, but I'll just quickly pass through some of them. Again, for the base plates, there is now an option where you can design a base plate. If you leave the thickness to 0, the software will find it for you, and, depending on the information here, the base plate would also be verified for fatigue. Usually, the next step is to add a new panel on the structure. These are the options to add panels. As we can see, many options are available. Anytime you create a new panel, you just have to select an option and select a given reference point. Again, I'll just add one just to give you an idea here. Let's say something small, and for the eccentricity here. According to that point, it would for sure be below -6 feet. And let's say we have 10 feet for the width, 8 feet for the height, and thickness would be required for fatigue if there is a truck gust. So I add this panel on the other side here. It's something that can be easily added if required. I'll go ahead and erase that because we don't need that, but it was just to show that it can be done. So, the panel is there. Later I will show you how to add attachments like luminaires to the structure. You will have access to traffic signal luminaires or other types of attachments that you may want to add. The next big step on the generation is the load generation. Here we can add the loads. The loads will be generated when a specific location is given. If you know all the information and you don't want to take it from here, you can just manually fill the information on the left side. So, we can see some of the information changed. I will just cancel them and keep them as they were. Here what is important is to see you have defined what kind of structure you have. And here, you have the option to activate the fatigue. All the fatigue information is defined here, so you can just define the fatigue information in this section. Once it is done, you just click OK and the model is ready to be analyzed. I won't go into details here, but you have a few options where you can get much more details on the loads of each of the members even before analyzing it. For example, I will just select a member here and I can quickly have an overview of what are the loads that we applied to the member, including wind loads, natural wind gusts, truck-induced gusts, and so on. Everything will be applied, each of them on different basic loads. The software automates this for you. I'll just quickly show you the loads that are generated. The software automatically generated the dead load, the wind load according to the wind speed you specified, the natural wind gust for fatigue, and the truck-induced gusts. There is also an option to generate the galloping load, but it is not activated here. It has been left unchecked for that kind of structure. Let's again look at the basic loads. So, these are the basic loads that have been generated. We will just display a few of them, so that's the reason why we don't see everything here. And for combinations, we also generate all the combinations required per the code. Once it is done, you will just run the model. Here, we ran the analysis using the p-delta analysis. You can also run it as a linear analysis as a first step, but usually it is better running it as p-delta because it's much more precise, and if the structure is sensitive to second order effects due to high axial loads, for example, then it wouldn't be taken automatically into account inside the analysis. Once you get that, you will have access to all the results. Let's quickly take a look at the structure's displacement. For sure, this is a big scale here. Per default, the software always scales the results. If we were to not scale the results, it would look something more like this, which is almost 0. So per default, the software will always scale with something here. So let's keep the scale as it was. All analysis results are available anytime as you need them. Here, for example, I'm looking at the axial forces in the legs. Since we are looking at a steel structure, I will have a look at the limit state design. We can quickly have a look at the limit states that have been verified. Per default here, we would just select everything. If I click OK, I'll see the scale of colors determining the worst. Red would mean it is not strong enough. And here, we're looking at specific combinations that I have selected. So, I'll select all the combinations and we will see the worst case scenario. So quickly, these are the results we can see in the software. One thing I forgot to mention before was regarding the units. If you are not aware, or previously used the software, you can change any of the units to your preference. I won't change anything here, but you can see the flexibility available. Now let's have a look at the report options. Let's say that I would like to have a quick overview. There are two ways of looking at the reports. Let's first look at the results with the new report option to see the results on screen. Let's say we will have a look at the limit state summary. Per default, all the results for limit state less than 10% will be filtered. But per default here, there is no filter. So I'm just going to click OK for the whole structure. I will get results for every member and for all combinations. Let's say I'm just looking at one combination and one member here. You see there are all the results for each of the combinations. In the report, sometimes you don't want to have all the results here, even on screen, so a quick way to get the results in a much more compact way would be to have a look at the limit state summary again, but using this new option, critical combination only. Let's say here for physical members. As this main leg here is only one physical member, you'll only get one line of results for that main leg. Here, we can quickly see that we have much less results. About 2 minutes ago, we had about 4,000 lines. Now, we only have 94 lines. So, 1 line per member, or 4 per physical member. If I'm just quickly sorting through it, I can see that the worst limit state appears on these few members, which I can highlight and display on screen. These are the worst loaded members on the structure. And again, if we're looking at that table, for each member, the software tells you in one line which combination was the worst one. All information here that we see is associated to that particular combination. Let's do it in a more compact way. We can have a look at the limit state summary again, but now using the groups. I'll explain to you the groups in a minute, but before that, we can have a look at these results. Now we only have 6 results for the entire structure, or 6 line of results, which includes the different groups. Each group has a critical member and a critical combination. So as you can see, we really get a compact results. In the report, you would be able to do the same thing with the latest updates. Now let's focus on the groups. We have 6 groups in this model. So let's see what are the defined groups. Whenever you generate a model, the software will automatically generate groups. You can change them if you want, but per default, we will generate groups for legs, the attachment between them, the diagonal beams, column main legs, the diagonals, and some other members attached here. The report will now be generated including that. Suppose you would like to get something else. Let's say I will just select the columns here. So if you would like to create a new group for column 1, I'll just go ahead and save this as a new group. This will be for every member for the group in column 1. And I could create another one for column 2. If I would like to have a look at the limit state summary within the filters per group, I will be able to see the worst member for each of the columns if needed. Let's also have a look at the results in the report. So in the report again, this is a regular report, and if you just generate as a regular report, you will probably get over 400 pages. This is not what we want. Now let's generate a custom report. Per default, when you come here, the menu will be empty. When you want to generate a report fast, it's usually quicker to check this option and select the default custom reports we generated for you. We decided on a few of the results that are more important and will need to be in the report per default. You always have the option to change it. I will show you how to do that later. And now, you just have to generate the report. So instead of having 400 pages as before, we'll probably get something closer to 40 pages or something like that. Okay, so the total was 60 pages, but it includes everything on the model. Again, the limit state summary will include only groups. So now we can see there is a lot of options in the report. But let's say we'll try something manually here. I could just create a one-table result. For example, I'll just select again the limit state summary, and I will double-click here, and it is added to the report. So, I will have a report only including the table and the same filters as we had before. You can have no filters at all, or per physical member, or per group. There is also an option where you can have a compact report. Compact reports are just a way, if you are clicking on the Edit command and you see the columns, so every table is now customizable. You can hide the columns which you think won't be required on a specific report. But whenever you are selecting the compact report, there is already some columns which will be hidden that we feel are not required for every compact report. For example, here is the shear limit state on both directions, but we just keep the vertical shear limit state. This is just an example. There are a lot of new options here where you can generate a report in a more compact way. That summarizes this first example. Let's have a look at another structure. For example, the monopole. The big difference that we now have with monopoles from previous versions is you are able to do everything you see here, but you had to do everything manually, including the option to have tapered sections where you generate tapered sections from scratch. Now, when you have this type of structure, it's much faster than before. The only thing you have to do is select it from the generator and indicate you want to use a monopole generator. We would need to specify a K value here, and that would be assigned to all members. And then later, we will see for these kinds of structures, usually the K value would be changing along the columns. So you can edit that later to adjust the K value along that, and we also now have an option to automatically recalculate the K factors for these kind of structures. But I won't go into details on that today. Otherwise, if you don't recalculate them, it would be a fixed value all over the height of the structure. So once you've decided you want to use the monopole generator, we will then add some stress information here for fatigue. Then we can edit the monopole directly, as we see here. So it's quite easy editing the monopole to specify the dimensions. The monopole would also be divided. To increase the precision, you might prefer dividing these structures. So, if I don't divide any members, every segment would have only one member, which is not enough. So let's say at a minimal to use 4 divisions per member, and if I put 10 here, that could also be much more interesting. This would allow us to get more precision along the member. Depending on the connections that you have between those here, I'll just display them here. And between here, we decide to have a slip splice between each segment, and each segment has a different length, different diameter, and a different thickness. So here, we also specify the length of the slip length. As we can see, the column above is just slipping on the below column. That's pretty much what we wanted to cover in this section. So every time you want to add a new segment, you simply create a new line, add some dimensions, and you increase the size of the whole structure. Let me just specify dimensions here. So you see what is happening. I'm just adding to the existing structure, and you can see the changes on screen. For sure you will need to specify the number of sides, if it is a polygonal section, or a circular section. So once you leave this menu, you just click Generate and the whole structure will be automatically generated using that button. When it is done, you would just do as usual, adding the required loads and making sure the loads are applied correctly. Also, you can add these type of fixtures. Here it was a luminaire. When you want to add a luminaire, first, you need to edit the list of luminaires you may have. If you have an existing list of luminaires, you can take it from Excel and copy and paste it in SAFI. Also, anytime a luminaire has been added, it is never too late if you want to make changes, or you can copy and paste another luminaire from the library in Excel. Or you can copy and paste another from your library in Excel. Usually luminaires would include dimensions, also the projected area, either in the X or Z direction. It would be required to have a vertical area for truck gusts. If there is ice, you may specify it, and depending if the area already includes the drag factor, you may force a drag factor to 1 just to make sure the value won't be changed, because if you don't do that, the drag factor for the luminaire per default would be 0.5. So depending on which information you have, you may have to change it. So once the luminaire library is created, you still have to add the luminaire. It can go anywhere you want. For sure this location is not the most interesting, but I will add a luminaire here, let's say 6 feet beside the structure, and I will select the luminaire that I want from the library. I then click OK. So, we can see that it is now adding the luminaire to the structure. That's pretty much what we wanted to show for monopole structures. Once this model is generated, as we see here, you just have to run the analysis. There is nothing else you need to do. Again, the results will be displayed as we saw before. Here we are looking at displacements for all combinations. You see the list of combinations is much less than we saw in the other model. The reason why is because whenever we generate the model here, you have the option to reduce the wind directions, so per default the software will try every direction, but if you feel the structure has symmetry, you can reduce that. This concludes this segment of the presentation. I will quickly go back to the PowerPoint and just make sure I didn't forget anything. So here's the recap of today's presentation. We hope you found the information useful and will discover many of the great benefits of the HSE software.